Chile here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and now I want to talk about the astrology of peace talks because right now there is a ceasefire, and I'm gonna have to do it by heart. So the moon is very likely effectively in Mula Nakshatra, which is tropical and decan of Sagittarius. Now, a little bit about the energy of ceasefire before we start. The energy of ceasefire is where I want you to think about an argument, a long withstanding argument that you have been having, and then somebody got that. For example, I was looking at chart for Eva Braun and Adolf Hitler, and then I was reading about Eva Braun, and it was saying in Wikipedia, Eva Braun was offering Hitler complete obedience, and there was energy that had quite some conflict with me over nothing. They said, exactly, that's what you will never be. And I said, well, of course. Why Eva Braun? Because Eva Braun was trafficked by Jews to the Nazis. She herself was apolitical um, as a part of the extortion cult that looted the Nazis to commit genocide in hope to try to loot all the wealth from both. Her part in the story is basically if she was to be trafficked, then eventually she fell in love with Adolf Hitler, or if she was trafficked, then if sex work is work, then Arbeit macht frei. But also Adolf Hitler was, they met in the 30s, and back then a lot of Jews voted for Hitler, and she worked at the film shop where they would film for the Nazi party. So that business was Jewish. so, uh, um, so that was really, really fascinating. But the energy around peace talks is there was a longest standing conflict. Somebody got it. People got it like, okay, we got it. Peace, ceasefire. Now, the energy around it is that people begin to remember things, and then they have to remind themselves that, okay, that's sorted out right now. Because the brain is slowly relaxing from the trauma of the conflict. What was the conflict? My I am was threatened. Now, it takes a couple of hours after the ceasefire. For example, my mom said it was ceasefire. I lay in my bed, sleeping. And then, of course, there is an alarm. And I say, Mama, the first missiles from the ceasefire. You say hello. But this is exactly the energy of a ceasefire. Now, ceasefire is a small study case of the bigger study case, which is peace. Moon is in Mula Nakshatra. Its lunar return for Mark Dutrow. And Mark Dutrow was running an extortion cult, but nobody let him talk about this. Including the father of the girls that were trafficked. For example, Melissa's father. He was dependent on that extortion cult for housing. Public housing. Now, because he was raped when he was a child without ability to escape or without ability to die, he needed housing first, independent of ability to work. But the closest approximate was to run an extortion cult. The ability to have euthanasia in Belgium, I think, will already be when he would be in prison. And euthanasia for mental causes was happening, I think, was legalized only after the true Rolodex exposure. They say, Sheila, but what's that to do with peace talks? What do you think an extortion cult do? Now, if extortion cults extort for peace and extort for war, it means that when both peace and war, some of you saw my funny meme with Hitler and Eva Braun. I wouldn't trade you for world peace. Now, as a person that has looked at whether it's peace talks, whether it's, my previous video was not really uploading, it was not really recording. It was recording, but it was not really saving. I don't know. That the atmosphere at the Palestinian-Israeli Chamber of Commerce was not affirming of zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning. And again, nobody touched me there. But it was not standing to the standards of what I call healthy, wealthy, and joyous. And that is why we didn't have peace. The idea was amazing. Rely on trade rather than on war. Everybody, I think, Bennett, Naftali Bennett, businessman, right-wing person, sold building material to the West Bank. And why not? Who built our houses? But when there is culture that normalizes rape, under any guise, Christians call it fornication when it's child rape. There's an actual authority that decides for people if they are married or divorced. Okay, recording. Over nothing. The reason you cannot have your off-grid mud house with some lime wash that holds for a century, a solar panel on the roof making water from the air, is because somebody is extorted to follow an illegal order to prevent you from having that estate. Your house, not investment property, not flipping property, not Epstein Island, a house. That's extortion cults. So, Moon Mula Nakshatra, Dead Truth, Lunar Return. Who would Iran go to? Okay, the Rolodex was exposed or the dead true Rolodex were the true dossiers were exposed following the fact that the United States did not want certain people in the Hague litigating the United States for Kurdistani genocide after the Gulf War. Of course, these people would want to get back. They say, oh, the Epstein files are out. Yeah. Who would be the people that would be turning to Mark Dutroux to get a list out? This could probably explain why Article 5 is not fully invoked. That's when you normalize rape, you normalize genocide and getting away with it. Now, if there is one genocide, how should I say it? If it happened to the Kurdistani people, why wouldn't it happen to the Palestinian people? Happen to the Palestinian people, why do we believe that the Israelis are exempt, that the Americans are exempt? What is ICE if not genocide? What is labor and death camps, jailing the people that are homeless and putting them in labor and death camps? Not Nazi Germany, US of A, not just Trump, started in Biden's regime. Biden was in charge when my colleagues from the Astrology podcast were called out by their viewers for not talking about violation of the First Amendment and the arrest of the journalists that were jailing the tent cities. That was blue pill, 100%. And I said, well, my colleagues can't talk about it, I'll talk about it, let them talk about Israel. And I knew a person lived around Oregon, Hawk Group, Hawk Astrology. From her, I know about the death and concentration camp because there was only one minister, or I don't know, in Oregon that didn't want to go for death and concentration camps. Later, we would have ICE. Later, we would have ICE. 2-3 years later, we would have ICE. And now everybody MAGA. It's not US internal affairs. It's MK Ultra all over the world. Just like American people don't have their off-grid house because some American people raped children by Epstein and many times were hosted by Israel. So American people care about what's going on. But if in Israel there is human trafficking, there would be ICE in the United States. If in United States there is human trafficking, which was my previous video that was not saved, there will be Israeli military elite looted, extorted to commit genocide, and then held accountable for war crimes, paying shilumim. Who should be paying shilumim? The people that raped the children. What if raping children is considered going to a sex worker that is 21, 22, or is 18? She was trafficked, she was raped. She is mind controlled. But she's legal. Housing first. Now, if a person cannot have a residence without rape, there will be no housing. If there will be no housing, there will be no nation. If there will be no nation, it will be, what is no housing, no nation? Genocide. Even in exile. For a person to not, when a person is raped, they lose their sovereignty. But they also lose, they also have inflammation, they also have diseases. They're fighting for their life. They're fighting for their life. What will happen? It's better to commit genocide than to rape and be raped. As long as the genocide is not raping, is not boots on ground, namely not people torturing people, sacrificing people, immediate effective death, and as long as there is right to exit violence to the people within the people that are genocided that don't want to rape and be raped. Now, more things that are happening right now. Mars has entered the last decan of Pisces. I'm sorry, Mercury entered the last decan of Pisces. Mars is 27, I think 27 or 28 degrees Pisces. Jupiter exalted in Cancer. Jupiter went retrograde on Procyon, which has a lot to do with peace talks. And the gnosis was exactly that. There is no peace when people are raped. There'll never be. If a homeless person works at, let's say, a barista in Starbucks, the inflammation in their body, they would need something to get rid of more than coffee. They cannot even sit over nothing. For that person, not even being offered money, is mind controlled, and through them, by the way, through spying through them, which there are technologies to do, they get information about the place. It's easy to bomb the place. Now, the more nights they have without sleep, the easier it is to get them to do mass shooting. It's a nervous system hacking. MK Ultra is a project that causes people to confess crimes they didn't do as well. And this is just one project because this is just one country. Now, more happenings in the sky. Saturn is still in the first decan of Aries. Neptune, second degree of Aries. This Saturn will meet Neptune again. The ceasefire is for 2 weeks. Mars is supposed to ingress into Aries. So and Mars is invisible. Invisible Mars here, sir, is good for a ceasefire, because when we have invisible Mars, we are rethinking war strategy. And that tells me that, I'm not saying through the entire invisible Mars, but this transit was capitalized very well. Everybody's rethinking the war strategy. Now, to calm our nervous system, we really need to be zero rave, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning for good. How do people disentangle from places where they weren't in that situation? If they get that this is the point, already we are 99% over the war. Jupiter being exalted in Cancer really allows a lot of the opportunity to go there, because it turned retrograde on 25 degrees, turned retrograde on Procyon. It's going to go direct on Procyon. We have Epstein files in the middle. Of course, that's the issue. And the more people get that, the more our question is, hey, but so and so, let's say in the Epstein files, we had women that had to traffic, young girls. They couldn't be raped anymore. And because of the crime, it was not just people pleasing sex, which is also rape. It was sadistic. So now people, the more we just ask, okay, so how people disentangle from those? How people go to zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning? How people disentangle from the fact that if they were a ritual abuse survivor and they were physically kidnapped, they had to rape, they had to torture, they had to murder. When we are tackling, when it's that level of question of how do we disentangle from that reality while no longer committing those offenses, we're in a good place. If we get that this is what we should be talking about, this is what we should be acting for, we're in a good place. Are we in that place? I don't know. And that decides the fate of not only the ceasefire, but any peace talks. Neptune is in Aries. Neptune tends to the core of. If Neptune in Pisces was both exposing us to the ability to create reality, our choices within the movies of existence, the ability to curate um, our beliefs and our gods, and the ability to rewrite our myths. Okay? If we mythify something and call it a whore, what will happen? What happened to Babylon? Why did what happened to Babylon happen to Babylon? Babylon was very smart. When it was conquering people, it was learning from them. But what did it happen to Babylon? What is the whore of Babylon? Their extinction. They normalized rape and trafficking. Why are First Nations doomed to have another wave of colonization? Because when I look for sexual sovereignty when it comes to housing, it gives me normalizing trafficking houses. what people call brothels, pretending that the people that are there are going to be safer. There's nothing safe about being raped. Even having sex to appease the husband causes inflammation, yeast, cancer cells grow on candida. Oh, but it's our culture, okay? That explains how come you were colonized. My grandfather's entire family died in the death and concentration camps. When my mother couldn't put me next to my grandfather because of him, I understand why the entire family was. It's enough for one child, boy or girl, to have been going through that. That's a Holocaust. It's a lived Holocaust that is normalized. And it's looked at as not to do fornication. Doesn't prevent cheating. When the judges do it, we cannot talk about due process. In the background, Uranus is 29 degrees Taurus. Venus, 9 or 10 degrees Taurus. Venus in her home sign. This is where we're going to have the last Uranus in Taurus. It's our last call. Last chance to get it right with the Venus Uranus, because it moves on from relation and diplomatic relation to trade. If we don't get it right now, Uranus said now, Uranus in Gemini, civil war clock, labor unions of the minors. What if the minors are also minors? We say, oh, they can't rebel. Children can murder. What do you think they're doing there in the mines? Digging minerals? Israeli-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce could not have peace through trade, because when the trade is human trade, then it affects the ability to be there. You can't have peace with human trade. And if businesses collapse, ideas collapsed, Chuva wanted, and this is a tycoon, wanted interdependency over the water. And it believed that there would be peace. But there cannot be peace when people are raped. And if people don't have a housing, now a person cannot be raped. This is how the truth was found. But what if they don't want to not be raped and to not rape? Well, also to not torture. Well, mass death of the cultures that allow a person to be trafficked. Mass deaths of the cultures that allow a person to not have a home. And it's not a difficult thing to have a home. A person can build a mud house with some lime wash, better sustaining than most of these in everything, whether it's earthquakes, natural disasters, abnormal temperatures. Where people are threatened with a sexual sovereignty, what does it say? A-bomb. Churches burning, synagogue collapsing, mosques burning. Why not? It's real estate. So somebody needs the right to mine minerals underneath. If we're bombing Ayatollah regime for being Ayatollah regime, we are already taking action. Now, as long as there is anything Ayatollah, there cannot be peace. Human trafficking is Ayatollah. Meanwhile, Israel's budget was looted. 2 human traffickers under the guise of religion. There are also secular human traffickers. But as long as the secular human traffickers are pissed off that the Orthodox human traffickers got the detour through the budget, they're not gonna achieve anything. You're not better than an Ayatollah if you normalize rape. You are an Ayatollah if you normalize rape. Under any guise. If sex work is work, Arbeit macht frei. Now, we touched on Venus, we touched on Uranus, we touched on Rao Formulout. Rao Formulout is excellent. What's the main cause for the ceasefire? Mars being invisible. Wanting to rethink war strategy. Moon going through Mula Nakshatra. Optimum time for seeing to the galactic center. What needs to be transmuted? Moon is housing. Moon is nations. Jupiter is choice. If people cannot have access to choices that allow housing, if people are raped in their houses, there's no peace. There'll never be. As long as there is rape, there will never be peace. Now, will that ceasefire bring a longer ceasefire? First of all, too early to say because Mars is invisible. It means all of us are rethinking. But then Mars is going to ingress Aries. Aries is a war sign. Aries is not a peace sign. Libra is a peace sign. Aries is a war sign. So, before the ceasefire, Donald Trump said, an entire civilization will be killed tonight. God bless the Iranian people. If an entire American civilization is already being killed, what prevents him from carrying out this threat and is already being killed since Biden's regime? Biden, by the way, was a part of the head of committee of MK Ultra. Why did Trump not abolish that? Well, maybe he was not sovereign in the face of something. Now, what was that thing he was not sovereign in the face of? This is what Iranian people should ask themselves if they want to wonder whether they'll be genocided or not. Because Trump has declared that he's going to commit a genocide. And bless the people that, that what would be the one thing that could make extortion, that could make genocide happen, and even a US president wouldn't be sovereign in the face of, let alone the American military? However illegal order it is, and shout out to Nadine Cold Lady because she talks about the cultification of the army, namely the Epstein infiltration of the US military. She can't say it. Maybe by now she has. But me fighting off being targeted by, and Googleplex people fighting off being targeted by, whether as academics or even as astrologers. I'm the only astrologer I know that talks about MK often. And Knitting Cold Lady, she left the Children of God cult. And Children of God are affiliated with many things that are still in place. But she says even when the army decides a certain action is illegal order because they cannot actually practically achieve that. Okay? For the United States to destroy Iran, if we are to have an effective and not sacrificing American army, American military in the prolonged boots on ground war, is a couple of A-bombs. It's achievable. It might be even achievable by something that operates like a drone. But even if it wasn't, still sometimes when Knitting Cold Lady is in a position of the army where she would say, hey, that's illegal order, that we can't achieve, still sometimes this consultation by her would be overridden. How? One possibility is extortion cults. To what? Through what Knitting Cold Lady calls the cultification of the military. The cultism of America, or the cultification of the military. What in essence is the cultification of the normalizing rape? If sex work is work, then genocide is an effective job done. Effective job well done is A-bombs. Why? Because what is sex work? Is looting Sex work is trying to siphon off the energy to loot. It's basically a person being trafficked, mind controlled, to try to convince another person to basically rape them, and then try to loot as much energy, money, whatnot, from that person to their position, to their this, to their that. That's not a job of the sex work. It's the job of the extortion cult. How can one do that job more effectively? With minimum energy wasted. Rape is suffering. Suffering is energy wasted. Drop an A-bomb. Nobody needs to get raped or tortured. It's getting a full impact of something that's megalittically powerful, appeases the desires of. In Los Alamos, there was a lady, and later she would be teaching physics at school, but she was assisting a lot of the Manhattan Project. And why? Because the only guy that treated her as equal was working in Los Alamos. Is a society that treats women in such disdain not summoning its own extinction? When you say women, it sounds like only people with certain cisgender. No, 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 no. Also boys, also children. The degradation of the feminine. That's what causes the inflammations, the addictions, the irrationality. Those things that people need to get. Those things that serve extortion called of getting people to desire to rape, to feel smug about getting away. If like a person is so free, if I could do anything in the world and get away with that, what would I do? Ask yourself, you can do anything in the world and get away with that. Can I travel the world? I remember when I was asking about that, I was working on Nato's chart, was at the airport, and I saw this video, I think it was in Finland, and there was a car that had to stop because a reindeer was crossing the road. And I'm like, can I get away with that? But when I get people get smug, that smugness, the level when people get smug about being able to commit things that to begin with they wouldn't want to commit if they were not enormously humiliated, raped, and degraded, and being treated as the feminine, with the feminine being profane. Then this is where they get to the threshold of smugness. Smugness is like, when you boil water, the bubbles that tells you that the water is boiled. Okay, if you need to cook something, oh, it's boiling now. It's being prepared. That smugness is 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 when it's cooking for extortion cults. They got them smug. Now they're at it. Boom, Epstein list. And now it's portrayed as justice. Oh, you think you got away with that? Ah, you thought you're a big winner, huh? Now, who? and then build another bubble. We are literally fighting about oil in the Star of Hormuz. Think about a sovereign country, each person having their own even mud house. A little bit of lime wash holds for a century. No rape, no slavery, no energy siphoning. Everybody's sovereign. When children are born, it's because they want it. Nobody has to worry about leaving a child outside. I saw a video of a woman living in Iceland, and she talked about cultural shocks between United States and Iceland. And she said, if in New York I would leave a child outside and go to the grocery store, I would be arrested. If in New York I would send my child to school alone, I would be arrested. I had a neighbor that had a brother. The brother had twins, a boy and a girl. It's not a big city, but when he was walking with the children, he was putting a collar on the children. Why? Because if a child runs away here, he gets ran over by a car. Runs away there, he gets kidnapped by a child trafficker, but he can't say it. He was walking the children like he was walking the dogs. Loved his children. They were at his sister every other day. He said people think it's funny, but when their children get ran over by a car or when their children kidnapped, they ain't laughing. That's extortion calls. That's a city that's infested with human trafficking, with child trafficking. Otherwise, he wouldn't tie his children. Police can't tell him nothing because if he asks the police to find now everybody would have to be a friend of a crime family. That lady, when she was young, one day somebody knocks at her door. She sees a person looking like the mafia. She says if she doesn't open the door, he will open the door. Will be more terrible. She opens the door. Person tell her if anybody harms you, if anybody this, if anybody that. Bullshit. It was trafficking women. But he wanted to be in peace with the people. And then he started telling another bullshit. Oh, in the jail, child molesters get this, get that, get that. Nothing. Who is in the jail? Now, what do they want from the women? Why do they protect some of these women? Ever heard of the Italian term signature? Because the church and human trafficking go like that. So does the synagogue, so does the mosque. Neptune in Pisces was curating every single part of our soul that didn't understand that. Neptune in Mars sign is curating regarding the what to do about that. Now that it's very clear that the Me Too went too far equals committing genocide in Gaza, saying the Me Too went too far equals to committing genocide in Gaza. Why? It prevents people access to housing, to job, to recovery. Without the cults that commit genocide in Gaza, meaning that the people that said the Me Too went too far were invested in the genocide in Gaza. So who should pay Shilumim? Everybody in the world that said the Me Too went too far. Everybody in the world that uses even term sex work is work. Everybody in the world that talks about fornication without talking about abolishing rape. If people get that, they begin to tap into how to get their house off grid with a lime wash that make it hold for a century. They don't even need to grow their food. The food grows. If you get angry, drink dandelion. I'm not a herbalist. I'm not a herbalist. I never studied herbalism. But the things that naturally grow are not contaminated with what's in the supermarket. Now, I'm not saying don't eat. I buy at the supermarket. I eat at the supermarket. But when I actually need to be healthy, when I need to have my greens, the supermarket greens won't help me. Even the organic ones. They will refreshen up a little bit, but when I need to have my vitamins absorbed, my minerals absorbed. These are not fertilizers, this is food. And then, of course, it is better to buy from, if I grow tomatoes and my neighbor grows garlic, then I can give them some tomatoes and they can give me some garlic. If I travel to another village, I said, oh, maybe I can leave some money and get some tomatoes from the local best tasting food ever. And sometimes even people have restaurants or cafes. In the holidays, entire Israel is in Osafia, Druzy village. Why? It's schmacklich. Everybody wants to eat the food. Tomorrow is peace with Palestine, where the entire Israel is in Gaza. Why? You haven't tasted Palestinian food. People have an event around the south, around the Negev. If it's no mansaf, where do you get mansaf? But it's Bedouin food. But if it's culture of rape, slavery, energy siphoning. Here and there, the food doesn't absorb well, the minerals, the vitamins. Even people cannot drink water. I've spoken with people that were ritually abused. I did not know to call it a name. I gave an astrology reading. Somebody that knew me from university talks to me to see that I understand a little bit of what I'm talking about and to say, hey, I want a reading with you. I say, okay. Give a reading. They begin to talk. They begin to tell me things that I'm like, They went to psychologists molested them. Psychiatrist was working with a psychologist. And no, I'm not talking about myself. The person came to me for a reading. So they're talking about things that look like even, and I've worked with people, how should I say, not in therapy, but in interface with people that went through rape, that went through, what they're telling is something like out of this world. Their timelines, things occultistic. Now I had no terminology for any of that. They could not even drink water. And then as the conversation, they began to develop with their own ideas for alchemy. Whether it's to light a fire or a person is raped, a person is in stress. Sometimes they cannot even digest food, or they cannot even. When I was homeless, sometimes I couldn't even eat. There was a lady that was buying me a coffee at the Starbucks, and this lady was trying to traffic me. I couldn't eat anything of what she bought me. I was so stressed. And she worked at the bank, not the jewel company, but the company that checks the tickets and put people. But in Amsterdam, her name was Galopina. It was a Friday, 2021, end of 2021, December 2021. Either 24, 5, or 6, the Friday, and it was her. She switched with the person, the side of the street that she worked, because he went to get a booster shot at around 1, and then she ended the shift. I was with her the whole shift. She called herself Galupina. It sounds like a stage name. Now this person, she was probably raped and tortured. And then she needed to recruit people to her work. She would go every time where they check the tickets, so to the central station, find homeless people there. That's where she found me. She said, well, it's not sustainable. Come, I'll buy you coffee. Or maybe you can stay by me. I was also homeless. Maybe we can fix your job, and there are courses and cosmetics and here. And then her place is a trafficking place. What trafficking place is the place that they live at for work? Turn to the police, you turn to human trafficking worldwide, nada. And she threatens me that if people drive black, then it will be big problem. She says, you know what I like in my job? That people listen to me. Now, I could never work because my bosses would complain that they have to be my secretary. I'm Dutch, but I don't look Dutch. So she says, oh, you're going to have to work. A passport costs €1,000. I said, I'm Dutch. But who usually are the homeless people? Who run away? Who are the locals that are homeless people? The child was beaten at home. What would they do? Where would they sleep? At the central station, right? She would pick him up there